next three topics that we're going to go over are the three most important and the reasons why I feel so strongly I do about believing that this election is one of the most important elections, and specifically this race is one of the most important races. And the first out of those three topics we're going to go over is wokeism, and more specifically, DEI policies, which are directly related to wokeism. So before we get into that, I want to go over what wokeism is, just so that you guys have an understanding of why I have the concerns I have for wokeism. So let's go ahead and watch this video real quick.
Modernism is messy by nature, but we can draw two key principles from it that have remained consistent. Firstly, a postmodern knowledge principle. Obtaining objective knowledge is impossible, and everything we think of as true is actually a social construct. This means truth is manufactured to fit the needs of those in charge. Intertwined with this is the postmodern political principle. Society is set up such that invisible and oppressive power systems work through all of us. We are all partially to blame for any negative outcomes in society. These power systems produce knowledge, and that knowledge is then used to keep the powerful in place. The original postmodernism died out in the 1980s, but its key ideas were taken further by the next wave of scholars in the 1990s. These scholars created fields like post-colonial studies, queer theory, critical race theory, and intersectional feminism. They weren't happy to stand in the fog and deconstruct things. They wanted to take action and change society. They used terms like imperialism, cis-heteronormativity, patriarchy, and white supremacy to describe what they saw as the dominant discourses in society. They used the term critical consciousness to describe the ability to see these systems of oppressive power, with the goal of revolutionizing them. Someone with critical consciousness could see the imperialism, white supremacy, and patriarchy in society, and reveal this to the rest of us through their scholarship. Over the next 20 years, these theories developed and became more solid and concrete. They became absolute truths that were the basis for a new reformation of thought. The theories seeped out of universities and entered popular culture. Students became activists. Social media allowed the spread of these ideas, and popular books like White Fragility and How to Be an Anti-Racist made them accessible to everyone. Those who adopted this new vision of the world left behind the skepticism of postmodernism. They were now enlightened, awakened to the truth, filled with certainty about the way all of society, all systems, and all interactions really worked. They could see it all. They were woke. The way that white person complimented her black colleague on good work, that wasn't just praise. It was white supremacist surprise at a black person having intelligence and capability. The way that man is sitting, with his knees pointing outwards, this has nothing to do with the shape of men's hips and their external testes. That's patriarchal entitlement to take up more space than women and crowd them out of public areas. What about the speaker who began with, "Ladies and gentlemen"? That's not a simple formal customary address. It's the erasure of non-binary people and an oppressive discourse that forces binary concepts of sex and gender onto everyone, making the world hostile to trans people and increasing their risk of violence or suicide. When one is woke and can see and feel the oppression everywhere, it becomes one's moral duty to call it all out, ban it and deplatform, punish and cancel the perpetrators. The rest of us are at best still asleep, or at worst willfully ignorant and refusing to wake up. The woke movement claims to be progressive, but its origins are more than half a century old, and based on faulty and unproven scholarship. Surely we can find a better and more modern basis for understanding the social issues of our day.
Okay, so I'm just going to sum that up real quick. Wokeism is basically an ideology that says a person is awake when they are aware of the systemic oppression in all areas of our society, like our culture, speech, different hierarchies, and different institutions like the government, school, even religious institutions. If you saw in the video, there was a pair of glasses that kind of helped um, focus things. And somebody who believes in this woke ideology, it's as if they have a special set of glasses that are placed over their eyes, and now they can see society and everything to do with society as the oppressive social construct that it is. Uh, One of the key things is it focuses heavily on external identities like race, ethnicity, gender, age, and class, more than it focuses on internal and spiritual identities like one's ideals. And the one that I feel is the most important is our identity as God's child. If you guys remember, when we first started these discussions or these issues, I talked about what it means to be a conservative, the ideology of conservatism. And the ninth principle, I said that the force of communism, and I changed communism for wokeism, but you can really just add communism and wokeism together. That the forces of wokeism are at present the greatest single threat to the liberties. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We're gonna watch a little bit more of this video to kind of help articulate and help you understand why I feel wokeism is so dangerous. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Real social justice is far too important to be entrusted to a group of far-left activists and zealous believers who want to radically transform society according to ideas from neo-Marxism and postmodernism. Woke ideology is a belief system that combines these lines of thought in the pursuit of liberation in place of freedom. In reality, any belief system that limits freedom of thought and open inquiry and is opposed to objectivity in the scientific method is bound to lead us away from progress, not toward it. Woke social justice ideology has turned into something like a new religious cult. It's the kind of religious cult whose beliefs are hostile to reason, disconfirmation, and disagreement of any kind.
We all have some form or another of privilege. Why does that mean we should kill ourselves?
Because you have white privilege.
It is common to believe that this is actually just a minor problem, and one we are now exaggerating. After all, aren't these just radicals in the university? Why should we be concerned about this ideology? Since about 2010, this new woke religion has spread into every corner of society and has started to change how we think and speak about many social issues. Woke social justice activists want us to reform the way we see every aspect of society, and even reality itself. Objective and rigorous standards together with capitalism are ultimately what it wants liberation from.
And I think it's a mistake to assume that we can combat racism by leaving capitalism in place.
Our new perspective.
So as you can see, wokeism at its roots, and if you take it to its extreme, is diametrically opposed to the ideals of both republicanism and conservatism, and for me, more importantly, Christianity. It focuses heavily on those in I'm sorry. It focuses heavily on the importance of those external identities and how they're oppressed. When somebody has those woke goggles on that I was talking to you about, they see oppression in, like I said, even things like speech and our language. So when they define words that we would usually feel like we understand pretty well, it means something completely different to somebody who has these woke goggles on. For example, racism is different. The word racism is completely different. And the words that we're going to go over, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are different because they have these goggles on and they're completely focused to one area. Um, let's just look at diversity. This definition of diversity: the state of being diverse, having a variety. That sounds great. That sounds fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no issue with that. I don't think anybody would have an issue with that. When we're thinking of diversity when it comes to a job, like say for example a bricklayer, when you think of diversity, you think of people who have different diverse types of strengths like endurance or specifically strength, but then also diverse in maybe ideas on how to lay bricks or how to um, run an operation like that. That's most likely what majority of people think when they think of diversity and it comes to that. Let's go to equity because that's the ENDEI, equity. The quality of being fair and impartial, justness, fairness. Again, that sounds great. I have nothing against that. That sounds fantastic. And inclusion. So when we're thinking about being equitable, we say that we want to be equitable, we want to be fair. Yeah, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be fair. I think that's great. And then inclusion, the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have a physical or intellectual disability and members of other minority groups. So that's what I wanted to look for. Not excluding any of the parties or groups involved in something. So there we go. Again, something that sounds fantastic. Nothing against that. Once we put on some goggles, so when you're saying inclusive, or when you think of inclusive, you're in an example. You think of at a work party, you try not to exclude anybody. You try to include everybody, and that is another thing. Again, sounds fantastic. But when we go to a group who has these goggles on or has adopted the woke ideology, let's go ahead and see how they would look at these words. So diversity, equity, and inclusion are three closely linked values held by many organizations that are working to be supportive of different groups of individuals, including people of different races, ethnicities, religions, abilities, genders, and sexual orientations. Like I said, they focus heavily on these external identities. So let's come down. Diversity refers to who is represented in the workforce. You can interchange workforce with the religious institute, school, anything. You can interchange that with anything. So diversity refers to who is represented in the workforce, in your government. Some examples of diversity in government include gender diversity, age diversity, ethnic diversity, physical ability, and neurodiversity. You can use some of these other examples too. Religious diversity and sexual orientation diversity. So they do focus heavily on these external ideas, identities when it comes to wokeism. Equity refers to the fair treatment for all people. So far, it sounds good. Nothing against that. So that the norms, practices, and policies in place ensure identity is not predictive of opportunities or workplace outcomes. Equity differs from equality in a subtle but important way. While equality assumes that all people should be treated the same, agreed, all people should be treated the same, equity takes into consideration a person's unique circumstances, adjusting treatment accordingly so that the end result is equal. So that's saying that equity is equal outcome versus equal treatment and equal opportunity. So if somebody is, for example, white and privileged, and then you have somebody who is black and underprivileged, you need to take in consideration their underprivileged circumstances and adjust the treatments accordingly so that the privilege is equal, and to them, therefore, the end result is equal. So that is completely against and opposite of true equality. And if we go look at the Declaration of Independence, one of the or the most popular part of the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we have a God-given right to pursue happiness. We do not have a God-given right to be happy. We have the God-given right to pursue things that make us happy, or to pursue our dreams, or to pursue our desires, but we do not have a right to those dreams and to those desires. So again, equity with that lens on, with those goggles on, it changes their definition of words, because they can see these, now that they're awake, they can see the oppression in everything. So things are changed. Our language is oppressive, therefore it needs to change, and I'll show you examples when we're talking about inclusion. But it changes so that things can be more fair for different diverse groups. Inclusion refers to how the workforce experiences the workplace and the degree to which organizations embrace all employees and enable them to make meaningful contributions. Companies that are intent on recruiting a diverse workforce must also strive to develop a sufficiently inclusive culture such that all employees feel their voices will be heard. Critical if organizations want to retain their talent and unlock the power of their diverse workforce. So let's look at some inclusive language. So phrases that should be avoided: at risk, bossy, ghetto, handicapped, lame, Indian, American, or Indian, man, mental disability, mediocrity, minority, sexual preference. See, I'm even learning some of these now because it gets changed. What was the other one that I wanted to point out? Oh, not sexual preference, opposite sex. So like man, woman, boy, girl. Another one that we talked about recently that I told you I had a concern about was immigrant and illegal immigrant. I don't know if you guys remember me talking about new Americans, because it's not inclusive enough if you call them illegal immigrants. Principles to remember. Every language is built off of rules and frameworks. Inclusive language is structured similarly. These principles can help you enter conversations mindful of the individual's or audience's preferences. Okay, so being inclusive. With that said, let's go ahead and go into the topics of DEI and the two candidates that we're talking about, Spencer Cox and Bill Lyman.